Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Today's subject, what is today, the 9th of September? My goodness, it was, not to change the subject, but 9/9 was the biggest fundraiser we ever had for Imam Jamil. It was the University of down in Southern California. And this is one we raised $100,000 cash. We had Ahmed Sakr, what's the pretty boy from California? That's him. Oh, Hamza Yusuf. We had, no, well, he used to be pretty boy. He's getting a little elderly now. But we had everybody there. And they was all pushing the program. I remember that's where I gave the talk on, part of my talk was about a Japanese holdout in the Philippines during World War II. And I had read the story because, see, when I was younger, they was always finding like 1959 and all of those years when I was a teenager. Is that a desk to pinch out? They was still finding in the Philippines and other parts of that part of the world holdouts from World War II. When I was 14 and 15, now this one that I was talking about, I was very impressed because he was found in the Philippines. You could see his hat it had all those years of work. And they told him the war was over and, it's been 25 years or something like that. He said, that ain't nothing. He said, I'll surrender my sword when you bring me the officer that put me on this post. And they sent back to Japan. They found out who was, he came and he surrendered his sword. It was a big deal. Well, to everybody else, it wasn't a big deal, but you could see in the newspaper him handing over his sword to his officer with his hat all, his uniform. It was 25 years of work. He'd been living in the jungle. 75, 45, 55, 65, 30 years. 75, 30 years. And that impressed me with stickability, the ability to hold on. That's the type of character we was talking about in those days. That's the type of character we want in our organization. Is that you're able to stick. You got to, just to want to do it is enough. You don't have to live up to that high caliber, But if you want to do that type of thing, maybe you can't hold out 30 years, but you can hold out 5 years. You can hold out 20 years. And I was talking about that is because in the movement, we learned years ago that some people could take it a few years, it would seem to be a number at 5 years, like if at about 5 years, in and around that period, people would either give up or change. Now you got to remember what we're talking about in the movement. If you're talking about 64 and 65 when they get rolling, so 5 years is only 1970. But if you notice our movement, that was it. Like they didn't have no more long, hot summers after 1970. You never hear about them up in the 70s. They made movies about him, a couple of movies, black movies, but it was nothing like that going on. And everybody had changed. They put, what's the name, was getting ready to be put in the penitentiary, the Blackstone Rangers. Jeff Ford, Jeff Ford was in the penitentiary with me. He was in Leavenworth with me in the 70s. I got to Leavenworth probably 75. I was there 75 and 76. And he was there all of that time for taking government money. There was a few other people from those type of organizations that had, even the Black Panther Party in Oakland had swallowed the pill of, like, okay, we'll take money from the government. Well, the government is not going to finance a revolution against itself. They're just not going to do that. But the thing is that everybody didn't know that, or they acted like they didn't know it, or by that time they didn't care, because everybody was brokenhearted, and they didn't have the opportunity that the Chinese had, that the Vietnamese had. The Chinese had, during 1934 and 35, they had the Long March. They marched all over the place. It's like marching to California and back, all the time fighting a defensive battle. And you would go through the same type of a country that you went. They had summer uniforms on, and they went all up in the Chinese Rockies and them high mountains and through mountain gorges. Hey, man, they had to fight through. They fighting all the time now. And in China, they have some of the famous battles, the three gorges. They cross Run River 3 or 4, I think it was 4 times they had to cross it back and forth and different things. They had to, one of the big gorges, when they had to take a drawbridge. And all of that was very inspirational. Here in America, we didn't have that opportunity. When I say opportunity, that means that we didn't have any place to hide and run and get ourselves together, or we didn't have Sierra Madres like Fidel Castro, where you get a chance to go in the mountains and be able to put a package together and go and raise a little army and then a bigger army. We didn't have none of those chances. We had none of those opportunities. That's why we should never be hard on ourselves for not following through on the rebellion. We didn't have any chance. Not that everybody can see you wherever you go. If you're black, you can only hide in the black community. And if you got every 4th person is a government agent, not every 4th person, but every 4th person does something, and if you're hiding from the government, they know that they can get a meal ticket by turning you in. So that means at least every 4th person was leaning in that direction. Although the discussion was black power, all power to the people, those things were very, very nice and what have you. It was really an inspirational period to be alive. But once we left here and got a chance to travel around the world, when we looked at every revolution or every decolonization struggle, this is the first thing we realized. We didn't have an opportunity at a protracted struggle. And that's what Chairman Mao always talked about, was a protracted struggle, a long-range struggle. And that's why Martin Luther King, in his last big speech, he said longevity has its place. He was very clear. And you could tell by looking at him that he had got that call from somebody. The call when you know this is it. This is the one, you're not going to be around much longer. And like the person that get the call, he knows that, and you could see on his face, it wasn't he was tired, it wasn't, he knew that everything he said, I've been to the mountaintop, I may not get there with you, you know what I mean, but my people will get to the promised land, all that type of stuff. That means he was clear that he ain't going, whatever it is, he ain't going to make it. This was his idea. Not only that, Malcolm had told him when they had that meeting, they showed Malcolm and King with that big brotherly meeting. Malcolm told him, he said, well, Malcolm called him a glorious fool. You're a glorious fool. And then Malcolm told him, he said, one thing about it, me and you ain't gonna be here no time. So he said, whatever happened. So Malcolm could see that. He said, hey man, and that meeting was in about 65, so he was about ready to 64, 65. The point is, the talk today is about lower your bucket. Lower your bucket comes from in the day of sailing ships, there was two ships that met each other out on the ocean, and one was out of fresh water, and they called out to the other one, we need, fresh water. And the captain, he said, lower your bucket. I think I mentioned this many times, but it's very important. He said, we need fresh water. He said, lower your bucket. And after the third time, the guy said, well, I'll lower it. So he got the idea that they were at the headwaters of the Amazon River. That's the biggest river in the world. So all the water, before you can even see land, the water is all fresh water. It could be at the Mississippi. If you're around New Orleans, you could lower your bucket because it's fresh water from the Mississippi. Well, it's a little muddy looking, but it's still not salty. So all the way out, way before, of course, the Amazon is the biggest river in the world. The flow of the Amazon is about 60 times that of either the Nile or the Mississippi, one of those. But it's draining water. When I visited Machu Picchu, that's the lost city of the Incas, there's a river called the Urubamba River. That river is 15,000 feet up in the Andes, and a city called Machu Picchu. I don't know if y'all ever heard of it. This is a lost city of the Incas, where the nobles ran away from Cusco, the capital, and they built this city up in the mountains. And you couldn't see the city from, if you were walking on the path down by the river, you couldn't see the city up there. But anyway, it was up there, and that reminded me of the Urubamba River. It's a river running right by there. That's 4,000 miles from, that's up in Peru, come to think of it. Yeah, it's up in Peru. And that river is the headwater of the Amazon. So the point is the size of the Amazon and the flow of water. We're a movement or an organization. And we always have to think of that idea, lower your bucket. When you want fresh water, lower your bucket. In other words, the things that we might hope for and want, those things may not be designed for us. may be designed for someone else. Some people, they get a chance to start a movement, they get a chance to do all of that. Well, here in America, you're not going to get a chance to start a movement because the United States government got everything closed off for a movement. We realized that when we got to doing this. We realized this when we opened the Masjid in Oakland in 1980, that we're going to have a different approach, but we have to still test our environment. Test our environment means we come out, we're Muslims, we want to have a place to worship Allah, da 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 da, and at the same time they have a revolution in Iran, and they happen to, we get